Together we'll arise and reach out to all the nations, as we are one in you, Gentile and Jew. For the key of Abraham has been given to mankind, and the key of Abraham opens all doors.
Now join Archbishop Dominiquae Bierman in UNIFY PNG with Israel.
And the key of Abraham opens all doors.
But you know, one day we had this situation. You know, the king was so enraged because his Queen Vashti decided not to show up when he called her. Well, to be honest with you, I can't really blame her. These men were all drunk after a banqueting of like 180 days drinking wine. Can you imagine men drunk for 180 days drinking wine? And then that Queen Vashti was called where the men were completely drunk and who knows what they were doing. And she said, "No, thank you, King. I am so sorry, but I'm not coming. And I'm not going to show up before those drunk men." Well, don't tell that to the king today, but I probably would have done the same. But I was raised by my uncle Mordecai. And when the king became so enraged with his Queen Vashti, he threw her out of his presence and divorced her right away. But he was so sick and so depressed because he didn't have a queen that he decided to consult. And his advisors told him, well, so simple. Just raid all of the maidens of the kingdom. They all belong to you. Bring them all to the harem, the most beautiful ones, and choose yourself a queen. And so that's how I ended up in the harem of the king. Raided from my own home, where I was under the shelter of my uncle Mordecai. My uncle wasn't that happy that I was raided out of his home. He was quite scared for my fate. He thought to himself, what is she going to do in the harem? And besides, that heathen king is an uncircumcised heathen. And so my uncle Mordecai let me go to the harem, not because he wanted to, but because the soldiers of the king came and grabbed me by force like they grabbed every other maiden in the kingdom that looked fair to them. And they took me to that harem, and there the eunuchs began to take care of me. Do you know what eunuchs are? The eunuchs were castrated so that they will have no desire for women at all. And they took care of the women of the king. And they prepared them with oils for 12 months, 6 months with this oil, and 6 months with cinnamon and myrrh and aloes and frankincense, so that after 12 months they would be so awesomely beautiful and shining and smelling beautifully for the king. But you see, my uncle Mordecai, he spent most of his days while I was in the harem preparing to meet the king, because the king will have to choose only one among all the fair maidens in the harem. But they were all so beautiful. They were all the best of the best. And yet my uncle Mordecai was spending all his time at the gates. He was at the gates of the king. He was looking in, but he could not come in, because he could not come into the royal court. He was of the Jewish captives, you see. And yet, nevertheless, he was there at the gate. At the gate, he was looking and watching and guarding for his Hadassah, whom he had said, now you will be called Esther. Why Esther? Because my uncle, with his wisdom, he knew that I could not release my identity right away, so that the king and no one in his court would know that I'm of the Jewish captives, you see. And so he called me Esther. Derived from the name of Ishtar, but I don't like that particular name. And yet it sounded so heathen, because it is derived from the name of Ishtar, the goddess of fertility, whom the Persians worshipped at all times. Just like at the time of Easter. That comes from the goddess Ishtar. I know you know about Easter in the 21st century for sure. At that time, everybody knew about it because the goddess Ishtar was worshipped in all of the empire. And I was called under her name, Esther. But also, the Hebrew word for Esther means the hidden one. So my uncle in his wisdom, he played with the words so that in the Persian Empire they will approve of the name because it was the name of a goddess. What best for the king if not an Esther that he thought was an Ishtar. But nevertheless, it was an Esther, a Jew, a hidden one. And so, here I was in the harem with the girls. You can imagine the fear that they had. Will the king like me? Will he like you? And you can imagine the jealousy around. Oh, you don't look that good. I look much better than you. You know what it is when you have 1,000 women together? They begin to think, I'm more beautiful. No, I'm more beautiful. No, I've got a better dress. No, my anointing is nicer. I've got a better perfume. But Esther, she didn't mess with things such as that. She was a noble character, and she did not take any part in the jealousy or the competition. And in fact, before they would be taken to the king, every one of them was allowed to choose for themselves the dress and the jewelry they will bring in. And they would go to the amazing. Oh, you can imagine the wardrobe in that harem. You can imagine the pearls, and you can imagine the diamonds and the emeralds and all the jewelry of the world. And they would go into that wardrobe and they would begin to pick for themselves that which would be more brilliant, more shiny, better showing, maybe more revealing. But not Esther. When her time came to go in, Esther went to the eunuch Hatak, the one that had been taking care of her from the beginning because she had favor in his eyes. And she said to Hatak, Hatak, I don't want to choose my wardrobe tonight. I want to entrust the decision to you because you know the king much better than I, and you know what the king will like. And the Hatak dressed Esther to kill. Oh, she was dressed up exactly like the king would like. And the moment he would see her, he would be stricken like by lightning that night. But you see, under the command of Mordecai, Esther had not revealed her name nor the nation she belonged to yet. She was still hidden, and she was still obedient to that Mordecai, though she was under the court of the king of Persia. Because her upbringing taught her to be obedient to authorities and to parents and to those that would raise her. Honor your father and mother was one of the commandments that she had learned. And though she had no father and mother, Mordecai had become her father to her. The Torah was preserving Esther all the way. And then she went to the king. The king fell in love irreversibly and decided she is going to be the one. And Esther became queen that night. Within 24 hours, a banquet was thrown, and all of the kingdom gathered around and danced and praised the queen of the Persian Empire that day.
The land that we usually read in the Bible the land that we know that it's full of milk and honey. So to go to the land and to experience the land, it's just the Bible coming alive. We experience good food, making reference to the milk and honey. So it was an experience, moving from one side to another. It was just an awesome experience. You feel the presence of Yah in the land. You can feel the anointing. You can feel that the shalom in the land. So I encourage those that are watching, come to the land and feel the glory, feel the presence of Yah, and walk through to the land. You will see that the Bible is coming alive.
However, Mordecai stayed at the gate. And you said to yourself, when you read the book of Esther, why is he all the time at the gate? And he's all the time at the gate because the gate was a place for justice. The gate was a place of gathering for the people, and even it was the marketplace. And also at the gate is where you could hear all the things that were going on in the city. And indeed Mordecai heard one day that there were these eunuchs that were trying to kill the king and murder him and just dispose of him away. And he went ahead and he warned the king that somebody wants to murder you, O king of Persia. And indeed it was overturned because of Mordecai, the Jew, that stood up for the king. And that very act of kindness on Mordecai's side, that was listening at the gate for every little piece of information that would come, because he was worried about Esther and he was caring for her and he wanted her to be very protected, and because the king of Persia had become her husband, he wanted to protect him too. And because of that, one act of kindness to the king one night was asleep, bothered in his sleep, and he was woken up. And he thought to himself, quickly, bring me the books of the Chronicles. And he read about Mordecai the Jew that had thwarted this terrible plan to murder him. And he said, has something been done to honor this Jew? And they said to him, no, king, nothing has been done to honor this Jew. But I am advancing in the story, because before that happened, this is what happened. A very wicked man, a son of Agag, an Amalekite. And how many of you know that Yahweh has a battle with Amalek from generation to generation? And how many of you know in Exodus 17 that he said that I will raise up the memory of Amalek, erase it from the face of the earth? And how many of you know how King Saul lost the crown because he didn't kill all of the Amalekites like he was told by the Most High, and he left the Amalekites alive, and because of that Haman could be born, a son of Agag of Amalek. Now you understand why did King Saul lost the crown. What's the big deal about not killing all of the Amalekites? The big deal is that if one is left alive, it can raise a progeny, and then the fruit of Agag comes to fight the same Jews that he tried before in the desert. And that's the same for us tonight. When we leave just a little snake, when we leave just a little snake of lies and of replacement theology, just a little snake, believe me, it can multiply. And it can come back again to fight exactly and even worse than before, because at this time in Persia, that son of Amalek rose up, Haman, became the advisor of the king. And when he saw that Mordecai, the Jew, my cousin, that raised me up, was at the gate day and night, and he refused to bow down before Haman, the advisor to the king, he became enraged. And when he heard that Mordecai is a Jew, his blood of Amalek began to boil within him. And he began to plot, how can I dispose not only of Mordecai the Jew, but of all the nation of the Jews altogether, and erase them from the face of the earth. And Mordecai refused to bow before the advisor of the king. He refused because he knew that the Bible had said that Yahweh would erase the memory of Amalek from the face of the earth, and therefore a Jew would never bow down before a Haman or an Amalek or any man, because it would have been idolatry. And so, we have a problem here. We have a serious problem here. Because Haman now, he has been able to convince the king to exterminate my people. But I didn't know anything about this. I didn't know that Haman had convinced my husband, my king, the king of Persia, to annihilate my very own people. But Mordecai heard of the decree, and in sweat and ashes he broke and he tore his garment, and he put ashes over his head, and he came to the gate of the king, weeping and with supplication, and spoke to my eunuchs, and said, go and speak to Queen Esther, and tell her of this royal decree that was cast by the lots, Purim, so that on the month of Hadar, the 12th month of the biblical, the Hebrew calendar, there will be 2 days of annihilation of the Jews during Adar 13. And then Adar 14 was added as well later on. But Adar 13 was to be this day, the day of the annihilation of all of the Jewish people. Imagine if that would have happened. Imagine if Queen Esther would have not known. Imagine if Mordecai would have not been at the gate. Imagine if he would have decided not to fight. I wouldn't be here today. My husband, Rabbi Baruch, wouldn't be here today. But you know what? Who wouldn't be here today? Yeshua, the Jewish Messiah, wouldn't be here today. Because that means the people of Israel would have been annihilated before the Messiah came. And therefore there would have been no tribe of Judah, and no Jewish people, and no house of David, and nobody to give birth to the Jewish Messiah. And if there wouldn't have been anybody to give birth to the Jewish Messiah, then there would have been no hope and no salvation for any nation of the world. Not even until the ends of the earth. But because this Mordecai came with dust and ashes and told me, through my eunuchs, because he couldn't see me, he couldn't be in my presence. I was royalty and he was a captive Jew. And yet, he said, you must fight for us. And I said to him, I was a coward then. Oh, I was compromised. Because I said to him, oh, I'm scared. Because I cannot go to the king. Because he has not called me in these 30 days. And if I go to the king and he hasn't called me, and he does not extend his golden scepter as a sign of favor, then I am going to be stricken dead right then and there. And this is what Mordecai answered me as usual. My cousin, that was like a father to me. He had authority. He knew how to speak to me. And he said, oh, Esther, Hadassah, if you do not rise up now to fight for our people, then deliverance will come to us from another source. That was a man of faith. But you and your family will perish. And who knows if you have come into the kingdom for such a time as this. I lined up right away. Oh, right away. I said, okay, look, I'm going to go fast for 3 days, me and my maidens, and you and all the Jews fast for me too for 3 days. And then I will put my royal garments and I will go into the king, and if I perish, I perish. I became famous for those words. But those were not my first words. Those are my second words. Sometimes we need a second chance in life, don't we? Don't we? So I got my second chance to do what is right and to overcome my fears and to run with it all the way to the king's presence. And lo and behold, when I showed up there after 3 days of fasting, pale, because you know how it is when you fast with no water and no food, and yet dressed in my royal garments, looking shining with the glory of Yah. Then all of a sudden the king looked at me and extended his golden scepter, because I've come into his favor, because I entreated first the king of heaven, and he gave me favor with the king of earth. And you know, I'll tell you something. If you entreat first the King of heaven, he will also give you favor with the kings on earth. So many people, they want to be popular. And they go to entreat the kings on earth. And they go and flatter them and make them feel good. Tell them all bunch of lies and hypocritical things just to make them feel good so that they can have favor with them. Buy them. Maybe even bribe them. I'm sure I'm not talking to anybody tonight. They just want popularity. That's not the way. You know what my King in heaven taught me one day? That it is much better to be popular with Elohim God than to be popular with man. So remember my words tonight, because you may need them sometime again. That when you entreat the King of heaven, he touches the kings on the earth.
All of Archbishop's books are my favorite, but the one that stands out for the revival of this nation is the Grafted In books. And that books have actually transformed lives of governors, of preachers, of prayer warriors, of unbelievers. And that book is so powerful that it can be used as preaching tools for pastors. And I encourage pastors to actually get all the books. But the one book that I see transforming lives of political leaders, political government heads, is the Grafted In book.
And now, back to UNIFY PNG with Israel and Archbishop Dominiquae Bierman.
And what happened then? Oh, well, he said to me, Queen Esther, what do you want? What's your desire? Oh, my king was telling me that I could ask him for anything. And he said even up to half my kingdom. Until then, he had the whole kingdom. I wasn't ruling over half his kingdom. But from that moment, I became the Queen Esther that I was supposed to be from the beginning of time, because now I co-chair the throne with the king of Persia. He had half the kingdom, and I had half the kingdom. So we ruled together, and it wasn't a woman in the harem, but a queen on the throne. But what did I tell him? Did I go ahead and spill the beans? And I told him, oh, listen, there's this wicked Haman, it's your advisor. You see him every day. And he wants to annihilate my people. Oh, no, 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 no. The King of heaven gave me wisdom. And he showed me that the best way to speak to a king is invite him to a banquet. Just go and have a nice time of dining and drinking. And then when his heart is happy within him and he's simply relaxed, then spill the beans. But no, I wouldn't do the banquet one time. I did it 2 times. But little did I know that between the first banquet and the second banquet, that wicked Haman had already plotted and had planned to hang my cousin Mordecai from the gallows. Because he was so upset that again he was at the gate, and again he was in sackcloth and ashes at the gate, and again that Jew did not bow down before him, and he was so upset that he went home to his wife, and he went home to his children, and he said, come on, I am so upset, I'm happy that Queen Esther invited me to the banquet. Oh yes, that means I'm very important, because she invited me, I'm the king, but I'm so upset. His pride brought him down. He was so upset. I said, I've got to do something because this Mordecai bothers me. Every time I pass through, he is standing erect and he's not bowed down before me. Everybody else falls to the floor and pays me homage, but not Mordecai. He's just standing like a soldier and he would not bow down before me. And as long as he's still there at the gate, I am not a happy camper. And that was between the first banquet and the second banquet. My. I didn't know, because his wife gave him an evil counsel. And the wife said, you know what? Don't you have those gallows over there prepared outside? Well, why don't you go ahead and hang Mordecai in it? Prepare those gallows. Make them as tall as you want to make them, and then hang him, and then happily go to the second banquet that Queen Esther had prepared for you. Can you imagine, between my first banquet and my second banquet, in the middle of the banquet, my cousin, the apple of my eye, like a father that raised me, the one that has been protecting the people, and he's the one that provoked me to show up as a queen instead of as a...
This message by Archbishop Dominiquae Bierman will continue in the next program of UNIFY PNG with Israel.
Yeshua is the name. I want you to get this book. The original name of the Messiah is Yeshua HaMashiach. It's not Jesus, it's a Greek name. But when you read this book, it will bring more understanding, more clarity to your life. It will bring more direction in the name of Yeshua HaMashiach. So get this book.
I will bless them that bless thee. I will curse them that curse thee. All the families of the earth will now be blessed. As we rise up together and reach out to all the nations, grafted in the